Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Taking calls on the subject, and we've got the question up on the Focal Point Facebook page. It's up there right now. If you want to go and leave a comment, go to your Facebook page and just put Focal Point in the search bar. It'll pop right up. And the question is whether you think soldiers ought to be allowed to carry weapons in their own defense on a military base. So I'd love to have you weigh in on that topic. Let's grab a couple of phone calls to start this segment. Let us go to Lynn, Little Rock, Arkansas. Lynn, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi. My heart goes out to the families of the victims of that. But I just have to say that everybody in this world needs to get back to the Ten Commandments. And I mean not just 9 of them. I mean the 4th commandment also, in keeping the Lord's Day, which is the Sabbath, and that is on Saturday. And so many people are trampling that. It even says in the Bible that they're trampling it, and they need to get back to keeping all of the commandments instead of just 9 of them. And start listening to the Lord for their security instead of looking to guns and to, blaming it on other things. They should be blaming it on Satan because that's what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and Lynn, you and I may have a difference on the command about the Sabbath. I believe that is the only one of the 10 commandments that has not been renewed under the new covenant that we find in Christ. You won't find a command to observe the Sabbath in the New Testament. So the other 9 are restated in the New Testament. They are there to be observed, I think, under the new covenant that Christ left. That one is not. However, there's clear reference to the Lord's Day in the New Testament, which was Sunday because that was the day he rose. And there was clearly a pattern for believers to gather together for worship on the Lord's Day. So that was a pattern to commemorate the resurrection of Christ. They would meet together once a week. And I think there's a pretty profound principle that God does want us to observe, and that is we need a 24-hour rest period once a week where we don't do anything we don't want to do. I believe that's critically important for physical health and mental health. I think God designed our bodies, and that's why he built the Sabbath into the Old Covenant, is he knew that his people needed a day, 24 hours a day, where they didn't do anything they did not want to do, and they needed that. They could push pretty hard 6 days a week if they had that one, and we have a day off now, and we're doing all kind of chores and yard work and running errands. I mean, it's anything but a day of rest. And so, I told my congregation this, it doesn't matter what day it is, but I think every human being needs one 24-hour period where you don't do anything in that 24 hours that you do not want to do. You don't want to mow the lawn, you don't mow the lawn. You don't want to do chores, you don't do chores. You don't want to run errands, you don't run errands. You don't want to cook, you don't cook. You don't want to run the vacuum cleaner, you don't run the vacuum cleaner. 24 hours where you do nothing that you don't do anything you don't want to do, and then the rest of the week you can push really, really hard. But Lynn, with regard to the rest, I absolutely agree, that we ought to renew our commitment as a people to the 10 Commandments. And you think, Lynn, about the command, thou shalt not murder. I mean, what if this guy had grown up hearing that at home, hearing that at school, because the 10 Commandments would be posted on the walls of his school, hearing that in Sunday school on Sunday, hearing that in the sermon on Sunday. I mean, repeatedly being reminded that God said, thou shalt not murder. A repeated reminder of the sanctity of life and the value that God places on human life. I mean, who knows? I'm not saying I would have stopped him. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying somehow or other that message didn't penetrate to this guy. And part of it could be that he's just never heard it. He hasn't been told it. Nobody's told him how important that command is. All right, Lynn, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's go to David Jackson, Mississippi. David, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I had a couple comments about the Fort Hood shooting.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I believe that Obama, as well as the liberal media, is just they're going to talk about it for a couple of days and then just move on, wait for the next big story, and no changes will be made. Just like from 5 years ago from Fort Hood, nothing was done, so that's why it did happen again. But I first heard about it late last night on a news station, and after 5 minutes of going over the details of what took place, they had Obama come on, and so it wasn't live, but they showed what he said when he first responded to it, and I quote him, he said, "We are deeply saddened that this may have happened again." So after he even knew what the facts were, he's still saying this may have happened again, so he's not even going to look at this seriously as being something that we didn't change 5 years. We're not going to now. And then to your question as should soldiers carry guns, I believe they should. I spent a good 20 years in Israel, and we need to look at how they do things. Every soldier has not just a 9mm, but a machine gun, M16, and they have them everywhere. You go on public, there'll be at least one or two soldiers that do have guns, and I felt safer there than I do here in the U.S. So we need to look how Israel takes care of this, and it does keep people from, shooting. If something takes place, they're going to take the guy out. He won't be able to take out more than one or two, and they'll get rid of him right on the spot.
Yeah. All right, David, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much for that. And President Obama, I don't want to be just relentlessly hard on President Obama, but had this tragedy on a military base. He's a commander-in-chief. These are his men. These are his soldiers. They die at Fort Hood in the shooting, and he goes right off to a fundraiser. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to picture George Bush dealing with this, and maybe you've seen the polling data about what soldiers think of George Bush as a commander and what they think of Barack Obama. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but it's a pretty striking difference about how little regard our current soldiers have for Barack Obama as a commander-in-chief and how much regard they have for George Bush. And I don't know. I think George Bush might have handled it differently. I don't think he's going to go off and party down and raise money when he's just had 4 of his soldiers cut down in cold blood. Now, let's go to clips 4, 5, and 6. Ted Cruz, speaking at Liberty University at their convocation yesterday. One of the things that we as people of faith are looking for is we are looking for a candidate who shares our Christian faith. I will be absolutely honest with you. That's important to me. And it's important to John Jay. This is what John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and this is what John Jay had to say. In my opinion, he's speaking as the Chief Justice of the United States now, it is the right and duty of our pastors to press the observance of all moral and religious duties and to condemn every course of conduct which may be repugnant to them. Catch this. Providence has also given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty, privilege, and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers. Now here's Ted Cruz speaking at a convocation at Liberty University yesterday. Ted Cruz gets it. Let's listen.
And if you think of our nation, if you think of the pilgrims that came here, they were fleeing religious oppression, and they were coming to the New World. And they fought a bloody revolution, but the more important revolution wasn't fought with guns and bayonets. The more important revolution was a revolution of ideas. Number one, they said, for millennia, we had been told that our rights are given by kings and queens and monarchs as a matter of grace. The framers of this country started with a radically different proposition, a proposition reflected in the Declaration. We hold these truths are self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed, not by a king, not by a queen, not even by a president, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That proposition was radical, that our rights come from God Almighty, not from a king or queen or ruler on this earth.
So that's clip 1. Here is clip 2. That's clip number 5, Rob. Ted Cruz at Liberty University.
You look at the battles that are going on now. We've seen the IRS demanding of citizen groups, tell us what books you're reading. Tell us the content of your prayers. Let me tell you something. The federal government has no business asking any American the content of our prayers. Although I wish they had responded, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. We've seen in Alaska an Air Force chaplain who posted a blog post, said there are no atheists in foxholes. And he was ordered by his superior officers to take that down. I guess because it was deemed insensitive to atheists. You know, I kind of thought that was the job of a chaplain, to be insensitive to atheists, to welcome them into the forgiving arms of a loving God. It's very interesting, that phrase, "there are no atheists in foxholes," comes from a 1954 speech that President Dwight D. Eisenhower gave to the American Legion.
So that's Ted Cruz talking about religious liberty at Liberty University. That's the school that Jerry Falwell started, and that's the guy that gets it. I got one more soundbite we'll play right after the break from what Ted Cruz had to say. So he's clearly a man of evangelical faith, and you wonder where the strength of his political convictions come from. I think that's where it comes from. You know, Ted Cruz is not intimidated by anybody. Ted Cruz doesn't care. I mean, he's said as much. I mean, he's been very upfront and very direct about it. I do not care what the elites in the Republican Party say about me or think about me. I do not care what the Washington Post or the New York Times says about me. So here's a guy that's got his priorities straight. I want to be careful. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm sure we're going to have problems with Ted Cruz at some point. We're going to disagree with him about something. So I'm not making him out to be the Messiah. Don't misunderstand me. But he's clearly cut from a different bolt of cloth than most of the Republican senators that we've got, that always seem to have one finger up in the air. They've got a windsock in the air to try to figure out which way the wind is blowing, and then they try to run around and get in front of whichever way the tide seems to be shifting. You know, they remind me of that French politician, I've quoted him before, who said one time, "There go my people, I must follow them, for I am their leader." Now, Ted Cruz is not like that. I mean, he's a leader. He's got principles. He's got convictions. He doesn't care who criticizes him because he is following. He's being guided by the North Star of what his most deeply held convictions are. We'll play one more soundbite from Ted Cruz when we come back. And once again, you know, Christians looking for an evangelical leader to follow, to support in the bid for the White House. Ted Cruz, a guy I think evangelicals are going to need to look at.